What's going on, Bulls Nation? Welcome into the CHGO Bulls Podcast. Coming to you live on Friday afternoon, September 20th. Getting ready for another weekend here in beautiful Chicagoland. I'm Peck, Bulls_Peck, joined by my guys, Big Day Bow, BAWL Sports, Will the Goat Gottlieb, Will_Gottlieb, our pal and producer on the controls behind the scenes, the one and only Young Spathis at Joey Spathis. Guys, we got some interesting stuff to talk about today. In case you spent yesterday under a rock of some kind, gigantic report came from a couple of athletic MLB writers, Brittany, Ghiroli, and Ken Rosenthal, with the headline, "An owner who thinks he knows everything led the White Sox to historic disaster." That owner, of course, being White Sox and Chicago Bulls chairman Jerry Reinsdorf. There are some interesting Bulls tidbits in this article that is primarily about the struggle the White Sox have endured, not just this season, but spanning many years. And obviously, it was the talk of the town in Chicago sports circles yesterday. So we're going to kind of dive into it as best and methodically as we can to talk about what correlations, if any, exist between what we learned in this report yesterday, what's new versus what was old in this report from yesterday, and how, if at all, it affects Bulls fans and our current lot in life. So, doesn't that sound like a fun way to spend a Friday afternoon, gentlemen?
Nothing kicks off the weekend like a little Bulls ownership, White Sox ownership talk.
Huzzah. Dave, you excited?
Huzzah.
Okay, so I figured we can kind of start off by reviewing how they kind of frame this in the few opening paragraphs and then kind of go from there. A couple of excerpts. The first that is an interesting detail is that The Athletic spoke to nearly 40 current and former Sox employees and others in baseball about the larger issues plaguing the dysfunctional franchise, which is run according to the whims of owner Jerry Reinsdorf. The 88-year-old Reinsdorf led a group of investors who bought the team for $19 million in 1981. They won the World Series in 2005, but have made only 3 playoff appearances since, losing all 3 of those series. Many of those who spoke to The Athletic, some of whom requested anonymity to speak candidly about Reinsdorf and the state of the franchise, said the owner's views on the game have calcified. That while at times Reinsdorf has carried a big major league payroll, he has refused to invest in the cutting-edge amenities and infrastructure needed to succeed. And to me, right out of the bat, there is where I started drawing correlations, because sometimes Bulls fans have been frustrated in recent years with a lack of willingness to adapt to the modern NBA game, a lack of willingness to invest in a greater department and faculty and staff dedicated to evolving the game and embracing the analytics of the game. And it sounds like, for the most part, that is the biggest chief thesis and concern that Ghiroli and Rosenthal laid out in this column, is that Reinsdorf is an owner that, especially when it comes to the White Sox, has been resistant to change and new analytics in ways that have held the organization back.
Well, they open up the article by kind of talking about this old, maybe dilapidated plane that the team rides on, and how that's been sort of a sore subject for players around the
Who
MLB.
else immediately thought of Major League when they read that? Because I did.
But it's interesting because I think like they use this anecdote to kind of like get into that larger point that you're talking about, Matt, which is the kind of lack of willingness or an aggression to be on the cutting edge of things. And that's definitely a criticism I've had of the Bulls front office. Clearly, I think a different story when you're talking about the White Sox. Like, the Bulls did just invest a ton of money into building the Advocate Center. Their front office has grown a lot over the last couple of years. Still one of the smaller ones in the NBA. But at least in terms of infrastructure, it seems like the Bulls have invested, approximately, at least on the same level as a lot of the other teams. There's always going to be the like Clippers and Warriors who are like just, the ultimate spenders who are going to outspend everybody else because they believe that's their competitive advantage. Obviously, the Bulls and the White Sox don't operate that way, but I thought that was just kind of, to me, that was like a immediate, okay, this is maybe a little bit different. But what's interesting about that is that, there's all these lines about how he actually prefers the White Sox to the Bulls, and he's more involved in, what goes on in the White Sox world as opposed to the Bulls world, which is in line with what I've come to know about the team. But I just found that interesting because it's like, okay, well, if you prefer that team and you like care more about baseball than basketball, like wouldn't it make sense to invest more into the, not just like the analytics and, you know, being on the cutting edge of like strategy and philosophy, but also just in terms of infrastructure and amenities and, you know, actual tools that you can use to help your team improve. So I found that to be pretty interesting because that was like one of the areas where there was like kind of a distinct difference from what I've come to know about the Bulls.
For me, it was stuff that I thought we already kind of knew. You know, I have a when I'm in a relationship, I like to tell the girl I'm in a relationship with, one of the things that I need is I don't want to find out something about you from someone else that you haven't told me yourself. So I don't care what it is. If I find it out from someone else, I'm already prepared for it because I know it's already coming. That's how I kind of thought when I would see reading this kind of article right here and seeing these kind of things. Like, yeah, I know Jerry's very loyal. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I definitely knew he liked the White Sox more than the Bulls. That wasn't a surprise to me either. He said it himself when they won the World Series. It was the greatest moment of his life.
Jerry likes the Sox more than the Bulls.
It was the greatest moment of his life. Like, he stated these things. He has always been wanted to be thought of more as a baseball guy than a basketball guy.
Yeah, he likes baseball more than basketball.
6 championships. Yeah, it meant more to him than those 6 championships. He's always been that. And then I guess the counter to that is, like you just said, Will, if he likes him like that, then what are you doing? Like, over on that side either, because I don't think things are working out too great. And I'm a Sox fan, you know what I mean? And I don't think things are working out too great on this end either. I'm not going to delve too hard into the Sox side of it. I thought the CHGO White Sox crew did a great job covering this yesterday. Shout out to Herb, shout out to Sean, shout out to Vin. I thought they did an amazing job covering this topic yesterday. Please go watch that if you have not seen it. Please go watch that. But yeah, man, like, for me, it was par for the course. I guess it was just different to see it on a national scale, and then kind of like, oh, the secret everybody kind of already knew here is now nationally known. So I can probably understand the shock of people who are outside of this, seeing this kind of for the first time and being like, wow, that's pretty crazy. Did you know this? And we're like, yeah, that's kind of been life around here for a while, man.
Well, I think the other thing with that, Dave, is just like you zoom out and you talk about like, okay, well, there's like rumors about this, and it's like around the Chicago sports kind of circles and narratives that everybody knows this. But there's a difference between that and like Ken Rosenthal writing it. And, you know, obviously I'm not very familiar with like MLB news reporting, and I'm sure Brittany Ghiroli, if I'm pronouncing her name correctly, is fantastic what she does. But like Ken Rosenthal is up there with like Woj and Shams and Schefter and like those guys that are just like top tier reporters, head of the class kind of guys. And again, no disrespect to Brittany Ghiroli, just that's Ken Rosenthal is like, that's the kind of level that he's on. And so I think hearing it from something like that would be as if Shams or Woj or, you know, Mark Stein or something like that wrote a big story about this in relation to the Bulls. And I think that would be a much different, you would absorb that in a much different way than if I wrote something about that, or, you know, one of the other local beat reporters did. So I think all of a sudden you just kind of have to absorb this information, understanding that this is now a very, very much a national story. It's going to get out there, and that, you know, people are going to have different opinions because they're coming from different teams and related to their teams and things like that. So that was just another, you know, the fact that this article came out was one thing. I think who wrote it is very much another.
Yeah. That's what I just said, Will. Like,
exactly,
when it's different when it's coming on a national level and you're hearing it from them and you're hearing it for the first time. It's different. It's not different if it's been constantly reporting. You're here all the time. I don't care if it was you or, you know, Johnny come lately reporting it. Like, we already knew these things. But you're right. Like I said, if it's on a national level and out there, then it's national news. Then it's on ESPN. Then it's on MLB Network. Then it's on First Take. Then it's on those kind of platforms that it hasn't been on before. So it's still not news to me, you know, but seeing it on that national level, I can understand why people would take that like, oh, crap, really? That's what's going on?
And it's interesting, and maybe the timing was a coincidence and it wasn't necessarily all about that, but when you think about the Bulls getting this column's level of negative national attention, It was around when Chicago was hosting the NBA All-Star Weekend in 2020. And what happened? They finally ushered out the Gar-Pax era and hired some new executives to come in and try and fix the mess. When you said Mark Stein, Gottlieb, you're referring to the DLLS Mavs Mark Stein, right? That Mark Stein?
All-City Zone.
Shout out. The thing you said about the fandom and his love of baseball, as opposed to just being a businessman in the world of pro baseball and pro basketball, Will, made me think of this other quote that came early in the column, just about like how Jerry views baseball. Quote, "You got a baseball fan owner who thinks he knows everything, and maybe he did in 92, said a former employee, but the amount of info has skyrocketed in the last 30 years, and he's put his middle finger up at that." I'm immediately getting like scenes from Moneyball and, the geriatric scouts that Billy Beane is saying, like, hey, adapt or die. And then the other thing that goes with he gets on base. The other thing that goes along with that, as far as like the timeline of Jerry and loving baseball, but maybe not being up to date with baseball, came later in the column. The 2005 World Series win was the franchise's crowning achievement under Reinsdorf, but it also gave the organization a false sense of confidence that kept it from evolving. Reinsdorf and a certain faction of the org felt no pressure to adapt. The personnel was so insular that multiple former employees described it as a time warp.
I mean,
you know what? Hold on real quick, Will, because I'm, as a White Sox person, I understand that part right there, because Jerry's thing has always, old school philosophy on baseball has always been get them on, get them over, get them in. And that is exactly what that White Sox World Series team was. They won their first game of the season 1-0. They won the last game of the World Series 1-0. Like, that's been the philosophy the entire time of that season, was get them on, get them over, and get them in. It worked. It worked wonderfully. Shout out to Ozzie Guillen, who I still want as a manager back here with the White Sox. But teams are going to adapt just like in any other sport. That's how it is. You win it that one time. Do you want to win again? Well, you're going to have to adapt, because that's not going to be the thing that continues to work for you. Yes, it's a philosophy that worked in 2005. It's 2024, man. And it feels like it's just gone backwards since that point, and since that's happened like that. So yeah, I'm not trying to turn into a baseball conversation. I just wanted to give my point of view as a Sox fan who was actually at all those World Series games. That's a flex.
Well, I think that's another piece where you can really draw the connection between the Bulls, where it's like this team had more success than any sports team ever over an 8-year period. They won at the highest level over and over and over again. They clearly had the recipe down. And then since then, as we've talked about many times on this program, like in the 25, 26 years since, it's just not been good. I mean, they've been on average a sub 500 team that doesn't make the playoffs. So clearly, when you think, and I know obviously basketball much better than I know baseball, but I know baseball well enough to know that the game has changed. And even in the past 10 years, the NBA has changed so dramatically, more than probably ever in the history of the game, just with the way that teams think about how they score, how they defend, what they need to do, how they put a team together. That has evolved so much. And I think there was kind of a period where, as you said, Matt, after the All-Star game here in Chicago, and moving on from Gar and Pax and moving into a new era with AK and Eversley, like, I think there was an attempt to kind of get with the times, and still it just hasn't worked. So that's an area where clearly there is a lot of connection between what's gone wrong with the White Sox in terms of not advancing in their thought process to the Bulls, where it's literally, I mean, maybe he did in 1992, but the amount of it's literally that since with the Bulls. I mean, that's exactly what the issues are.
And I think that the correlation of trusting people he's always trusted and the Reinsdorf loyalty factor outweighing embracing new information and new technology and outside hires is another one of those clear crossovers. Tony La Russa, John Paxson much? We could talk about that on the other side of this break. Stick right around. More CHGO Bulls after this. Today's show brought to you by our friends at Circa Sportsbook. Whether it's pro or college, the app to bet football is Circa Sports Illinois. Gosh, isn't it just the best time of year? We got college football all day, all night, every Saturday. NFL football all day, all night, every Sunday. It's the best. That's right. Hook 'em horns, Dave. Circa Sports, it's sports betting the way it should be. Circus Sports Illinois has high betting limits, low holds, and exceptional customer service. Real people behind that Circus Sports Illinois app who resolve issues you might have in a timely fashion, unlike the dreaded chatbots the other servers use. Bet on all your favorite teams in every game this season. Spreads, props, futures, or in-game bets, Circa Sports has it for you. Fund and bet like a pro from anywhere, anytime in this great state of Illinois. Download your new bookie today at circusports.com. Must be 21 and over. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER.
Ladies and gentlemen, beginning October 1st, the Blackhawks, Bulls, and White Sox will have a brand new home. Introducing the Chicago Sports Network, CHSN. It will broadcast more than 300 live games per year across the Hawks, Bulls, and White Sox, and will feature a full lineup of original Chicago-focused sports content. They're also Chicago-based, they're also Chicago-built, and they are Chicago to the bone. And they're bringing it to every single corner of Chicago across all 77 neighborhoods and beyond. So when you watch that game and you enjoy that Bulls game or that Blackhawks game, make sure you stop here first for the pre, go there for the game, come back here for the post. That is what you should be doing, because at CHSN, Chicago comes first. Visit chsn.com for more info on how to watch the Bulls, Blackhawks, and the White Sox games all season long.
All right, continuing our conversation about this athletic column on Reinsdorf and his dilapidated White Sox. The Shy in the comments pointing out the Tony La Russa hire, and the fact that this column confirmed that La Russa is still around the organization, chiming in and being in that special advisor role. That sounds probably familiar to Bulls fans who know that John Paxson is still lurking around in various corners, having left his executive vice president of basketball operations role 4 years ago. The thing about La Russa to me, and we've had conversations with our Sox guys, Sean and Vinny and Herb about this, and just the gigantic collective eye roll of every White Sox fan in the world who has the information of modern day baseball, saying this guy hasn't managed on the professional Major League Baseball level in a decade. He is 76 years old at the time you hire him, and he is getting caught in press conferences not knowing the correct rules of modern day MLB baseball. And so that's why it's kind of glaring when you know that this manager at one point in time was this Hall of Fame, everybody respects La Russa and his, Hall of Fame caliber baseball brain. He's sitting there in a postgame show saying, "Oh, I didn't know that rule." And that's the thing I think that a lot of people look at when they say Jerry is loyal and people around him love the loyalty, but sometimes that loyalty is a fault, Dave.
Oh, man, that is so beautifully said. It is absolutely a sign of his loyalty. And y'all know my greatest strength and weakness is I am incredibly a loyal person. That's who I am, all right? I am loyal. But this kind of loyalty is wild, because his loyalty goes back to the fact that La Russa, when he was let go, he never forgot that. He never, that just didn't work out. And he went back and said, I'm going to right a wrong from 30, 40 years ago and bring this dude back in. And what made it so frustrating is the White Sox team was set up to be really good and set up to succeed. Everything was, kind of in line. The pitching was lined up nicely. You were having Jose Abreu coming off MVP kind of season. And, guys are just looking good. And it was a great locker room to be in. Abreu was taking pay cuts just to stay there. You just had Luis Robert come up, and all you had Ricky Renteria, who was always kind of like that stepping stone kind of manager. Same day they did with the Cubs. When Renteria left, who did they go get to step up? Joe Madden, World Series. Makes sense, right? So we're like, okay, Renteria's here. Time to get that step-up manager, man, to take that next step. And here comes Tony La Russa out of nowhere. Listen, Ohtani put up one of the greatest, probably the greatest game I have ever seen in baseball yesterday. I've never seen anything like that yesterday. My very first thought when he hit his third home run was Tony La Russa would have scolded him to death and took him out the game, because that is exactly what he did to Yermine Mercedes. And we hadn't heard from that dude since he took off that young man's confidence, man. You ain't heard from that dude since. It was horrible, man. So it was just a terrible decision. You just saw how out of touch it was, Matt. You brought up the rules that he didn't even know. And I'm like, you cannot tell me about unwritten rules when you don't even know the ones that are written. Like, that was so upsetting to me to watch and to hear, man. Like, it was just so damn frustrating. I didn't know I was going to get this upset about this right here, man. But, dude, it was really frustrating watching Tony Russa be brought back in, and it was strictly for that loyalty. That's it. And then keeping him around is strictly for that loyalty, because you see it hurt your team, and so you're going to continue to hurt it to be loyal to a person like that who ain't been in baseball and I don't know how long, bro. Like, it's frustrating. It just becomes very frustrating.
Yeah, and I think like it's hard to imagine what the Bulls equivalent of that would be. Like, I mean, that would be like bringing back packs in like 20 years or something like that. I mean, that
no, that's exactly what
it's not just like bringing back packs. Like, that would be that's like a different level that I can't honestly fully comprehend. But I think your point about like this loyalty over like what's best for the actual organization, or like loyalty being the bottom line as opposed to winning being in the bottom line, is an interesting point. And I think we've obviously seen some of that with the Bulls, like, you know, Gar and Pax having their, you know, regime as long as it lasted is probably not something that you see with most organizations. I would say most ownership groups, like, they get a sense of whether or not things are going right or wrong, and then they make moves. And that's just not been the case with this Bulls organization, and clearly not with the White Sox either. So it's just, you know, it's fascinating to think about. It's hard to imagine like what you or I or any of us would do in that situation, because like it's fun to play like armchair GM or armchair owner, but like I'm sure it's way different when you're actually in that role. But to me, like, winning or figuring out new ways to win is just like that would be the most important thing. And that's what I try to do when I analyze this team. I come at it from the perspective of, what do the Bulls need to be doing differently on the court so that they have a better chance to win? How do the Bulls need to manage their cap sheet in a better way so that it leads to winning down the road? What do the Bulls need to do to acquire assets to be able to put together a package to trade for a player, or collect enough draft picks to be able to build a team from the ground up to be able to win? And so it's not like I'm thinking about this like a fan or, you know, a media member, or really any of those things. It's just like, I'm trying to figure this out from the perspective of like, how does the front office or ownership operate? And that's just different than I would do. And again, it's a totally different scenario. Like, I'm not in that position, so I can't really speak to it, but like, that would just be my approach. And it just, you're getting all these examples of how that's not the case with the White Sox.
Yeah, and I think that that's an important distinction when we talk about like what lines up in this column about the Sox that we also know to be true about the Bulls, and the fact that they share an ownership, is that, you know, talking about the way that Russa was hired, and then even after that, the hasty hiring of Getz in-house in you know, before even looking at potential outside hires and that kind of stuff, stems from the fact that Jerry and his passion for baseball and this baseball team is still very much hands-on, as opposed to what we, I think, all mostly know to be reportedly true, which is that Jerry passed the reins of the day-to-day operation of the Chicago Bulls off to his son, Michael, who then hired out some people to help him run that business, and whether it be the basketball side or the business side. Because in this column, I'm just going to read this because I think it's telling, parentheses, Jerry's, his influence on the team is everywhere. It's not unusual for Reinsdorf to text broadcasters in-game about what they're saying, to attend offseason and spring training meetings, he lives in Arizona, or to solicit advice from his cabinet of hand-picked advisors. Then it talked about how and why he let Brittany go take the interview and initially take the job with the Tigers because he didn't like him. But the fact that the Russa hire and then the Getz hire, like, it caught people off guard. There was a little tidbit. The email the White Sox sent out to fans announcing Russa's hire included an image of AJ Hinch's signature, the manager that everybody thought the Sox were about to hire, and that's who some people working in the White Sox front office wanted to hire. But before Hinch even made it to Chicago for the interview, Reinsdorf pulled a stunner, hiring 76-year-old Russa, who hadn't managed in a decade. the blunder about the wrong signature and putting Hinch's signature on the Russa hire announcement was chalked up to be a graphics glitch, but it was seen inside and outside the organization as further proof that Reinsdorf had passed over Rick Hahn's choice for his own choice. And that is a Jerry still way more involved on how the White Sox are run than the Jerry that relates to the Chicago Bulls in the present day.
Oh, without a doubt. That's definitely what it shows. And I mean, imagine if he loved the Bulls as much, guys. Like, seriously, like, think about that. Like, a lot of people upset about, Jerry Reinsdorf, the things he's made with the Bulls. Imagine if he loved them like he loved the White Sox. Like, that would be a wild situation. But yeah, man, like, I don't mind loyalty. I don't mind hiring people that are around you, that you feel smarter than you. I've told you guys on several occasions, if I was running the Bulls, Will is my first hire, like, to run the day-to-day things, and Matt is going to be on the bench coaching, yelling at people. You know what I'm saying? Like, those are the things. But my loyalty will not lead me to say, hey, Matt, come run this team. You know what I'm saying? Like it wouldn't lead me to do that. I would not put him in a position like that. Like, for me, the loyalty becomes a fault when you're just basically, and again, it's just what it feels like to me. I'm speaking for myself. When it feels like you're opening the door and just looking and seeing who's around and saying, hey, you want to run this? Yeah. Okay. All right. Come on. Let's do this. Let's see what happens. AJ Przinsky, I remember he's talked at length. I've been listening to him recently about the White Sox and how much he wanted to be involved back with the team and wanted to be in the running, like, for management and things like that. Everything was smooth until he basically called out the White Sox during the season, talking about they made bad moves and done some bad things. That was the end of AJ Przinsky's, being looked at as anything, for this White Sox team, man. It's just that sense of loyalty. I don't mind loyalty. I'm loyal. I love it. I think it's a great thing, but you got to know when to say when, just like with anything, like with alcohol, with food, with anything. Too much of it makes you an addict, man. And addictions are bad. And man, like, it's just these people that are being hired on these things, like, you don't really know their backgrounds. Some of them, their backgrounds, but they've been out of the realm and out of the circle for about 20 years. So you're wondering why they're even involved. Like, his loyalty is a little bit different, man. And I'm sure, and I've heard some great things about Jerry Reinsdorf when it comes to his loyalty to staff and the things that he has done for some of these people, man. It is really cool things that he has done for these guys both in the Bulls organization and the White Sox organization who work there. I've heard those stories, man. Those are really just amazing stories that I've heard, how he looks out for them. That's really cool. But you can't continue to put people in positions when they're just not going to be what you think that they are. Like, especially when anybody on a national level outside looking in is like, what are you doing? That's not a right hire. Like, no, that person wouldn't work there. That wouldn't work there. That wouldn't work there. And it doesn't. Because then it becomes a, hey, let me prove you wrong kind of thing. Man, no, don't do that with my teams that I love. Let's just get some people in here who we know will work, and that these things will be okay. And Jerry's had those kind of issues, but he's been the same. He has not been any different when it comes to those things, man. He has been the same kind of person.
And Will, I think that a difference is, again, when we're talking White Sox versus Bulls and how Jerry is at the top of it and how everything infiltrates and operates, the family business thing, I think, is true for both. And I think some of what Dave just said is accurate, and that there have been some people who have been some of the people in the Last Dance documentary that came out 4 years ago who were talking about the dynasty are still working with the Bulls, who were working with the Bulls in the 1980s when, Jerry bought the team and hired people. There is some, I think, positive element of that, but it also, as Dave said, puts people maybe in positions where they shouldn't be. This excerpt from the column: the White Sox are run like a family business. Many employees have personal relationships with Reinsdorf's, and the team's job security is arguably the best in baseball, but Reinsdorf can be loyal to a fault. Quote, they have people there with no business being in Major League Baseball, end quote, said an executive with another team. That's what you're talking about, Dave, like outside eyes looking into their system of operation and saying, this person is in this role. I don't necessarily think it's the same with the Bulls. There is the element of when AK and Eversley arrived, both of them expressed their, maybe not shock, but surprise at how small the basketball staff was that they, were welcomed by. It's not that people were in roles that they did not deserve because they did not have the skills and intelligence to fill those roles, like it is being, levied in this column about the White Sox and their staff. It's like a different shade of gray in that sometimes that same loyalty keeps people in positions for maybe longer than they have proved they've earned them, Will.
Yeah, I think there's plenty of kind of differences there, and maybe we can get to them after the break.
Okay, let's do that.
Ray, CDJR. Before you hit the road this fall, head to Ray Chrysler Dodge Jeep and Ram and start your adventure right there. This September, shop new, lower prices across their huge inventory during Jeep Adventure Days going on right now. For a limited time, lease the new 2024 Jeep Grand Cherokee Laredo for just $239 a month for 27 months, or shop over 125 vehicles priced under $20,000. Let the amazing team at Ray CDJR help you during each step of your car shopping journey. With Ray's Price Promise, the numbers you're hearing now are the same prices you can expect to shop in-store and online. That's because Ray's Price Promise means no price changing, no add-ons, and no hidden fees ever. Since they prioritize affordability for their customers, hurry into Ray CDJR today and shop one of Chicago's largest inventories. Then drive home with more money in your hip pants than you'd expect. If you're in the market for a new vehicle, then you have to check out our team at Ray Chrysler Dodge Jeep and Ram, because they are the only team that we recommend. Visit them today on Route 12 in Fox Lake. For more information, visit Ray CDJR in Fox Lake or raycdjr.com, serving the community since 1963.
Another reminder to become a CHGO diehard right now if you aren't one already. Shout out to those of you who already are and figured out that you need to be in the Cool Kids Club with all the best benefits and all the best coverage of your favorite Chicago sports teams. Shout out to our CHGO Bears crew. You should hang out with them and some of our other fellow CHGO people and all of your fellow diehard Bears fans for this Sunday's Bears-Colts game at Joe's on Weed Street. Come hang out at the watch party. It starts at 11 a.m., of course, a noon Central Time kickoff. You can get a $10 general admission ticket, and you can also reserve tables for groups of 4 or 6. And check this out, a $65 drink package upgrade available, including all you can drink Miller Lite, White Claw, plus mimosas and Bloody Marys, craft and import beers, cider, seltzers, premium mixed drinks, and soda from 11:30 a.m. until the end of the game. I don't know about y'all, but for me, I see $65 all you can drink with all of those drinks at a bar for a Bears game, and I'm saying I can easily get my money's worth on that offer. Right. Also, go hang out with our Bears crew in London for the Bears game happening in London. Go hang out with them on their trip down to Arizona for Bears Cardinals later this season. There are travel packages available for those. Diehards get discounts on those events. They also get discounts on our CHGO Bulls and Blackhawks takeovers coming up, as they have also done for North and South Side of baseball takeovers all summer long. There's just perks on perks on perks, plus 20% off every time you shop at that ALLCITY merch locker with incredible gear, hats, winter caps, hoodies, t-shirts, pint glasses. Check it out. I got my CHGO basketball pint glass rocking today. 20% off every time you shop. A free shirt when you sign up. Become a CHGO diehard. Get access to the Diehards Only Discord lounge to avoid all the bots and the ads on Twitter these days, and just have fun conversations with your fellow diehard fans. Sign up to be a CHGO diehard today. Okay, with that, so we were talking about like the differences of the loyalty thing and how it impacts both the White Sox and the Bulls, but how they kind of are impacted in different ways, Will.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the way that the Sox are run, especially now in comparison to how the Bulls are run, especially now with this new front office regime in there. I think a lot of that, it's not gone, obviously, but even just like Jerry's involvement, as far as I know, and he said this when we spoke to him briefly at the Ring of Honor event last year, and this, it's what he said, and then also like what I've come to know from various people around the organization over the last couple of years is that he's really not involved in the day-to-day operations of the Bulls in the same way that he is with the White Sox. He handed that off to his son, Michael Reinsdorf, who is the CEO of the Bulls right now, the president and CEO. But even over the last couple of years, as far as I understand, Michael has been a lot more hands-off. And it's really, the front office group, Arturas, Mark, and then on the business side, Ram Padmanabhan, who's the COO and general counsel, who are kind of running things. So I don't think it's like, and who knows exactly what the finer details of it are, but I don't think Jerry or even really Michael are in there telling people who to hire, telling people who to trade or nixing trades. I had a report a couple of months ago about how the front office basically presented the options to the ownership group at the trade deadline as far as understanding what they could do with their trade assets. Should they go towards the bottom and try to keep their pick? Should they try to make a push for the play-in? And obviously what I had heard in the report was that the ownership group wanted them to push for the playoffs. So I don't think, and I double checked on this after the fact because there was a lot of pushback against it. Like, this was not to say that the ownership group came in and vetoed any trades. They're not involved in that way. I think that was just the preference from them that they continue to push for it. So I think that kind of speaks to their involvement in terms of not being in a situation where Jerry's coming in and say, no, actually, let's get these people out of here and bring back Pax and Gar or whoever else. But they are a team or for an ownership group that wants to try to compete and win and run this thing like a business. So I think there are some similarities there, but clearly in terms of involvement from ownership on a day-to-day basis, very much different than what appears to be going on with the White Sox.
Mm-hmm. Will, do you know when Jerry kind of became more hands-off?
I don't know. It was before I was like covering the team on a full-time basis. I believe Michael this is just kind of anecdotal recollection, but I believe Michael kind of took over a little bit more once they started doing the rebuild. So that would be my guess, but I can do some digging on that. But certainly, and Jerry even said it, like, I'm emeritus now. Like, I'm not really involved in the day-to-day. And from what I understand, like from the people who I've talked to, like, that very much is in line with how they feel about it.
It is interesting to wonder about the longevity that might exist for, in the case of the Bulls, Arturas and Eversley, and the fact that it is Michael Reinsdorf and his trusted advisors who are, overseeing the basketball ops people and their job performance. And maybe, and I think, Will, you've, posited this to me before in the past, that like people roll their eyes when they think about the loyalty factor with Jerry when executives are not getting the job done as far as winning on the floor. And then maybe they don't have the same level of loyalty that John Paxson and Gar Forman have because they haven't been around as long, and neither of them have anything to do with the dynasty. And not that Gar Forman was around for the dynasty, but he was a long-time employee who Jerry very much trusted. And that is something that's curious to me, when maybe the White Sox just, hastily went through their hirings, after firings, and that maybe it won't necessarily go the same way. Maybe AK and Eversley don't have as long of a leash as some Bulls fans assume they do. If the Bulls and Michael Reinsdorf in particular are frustrated by a lack of winning results and do, in fact, see that a middling team that loses in the play-in tournament year after year is not a good enough result. But then where else are the outside hires? And where will they come from? And who will be running the hiring process for those? Because, again, in the case of the White Sox, it is very clear in this column, this reporting from Rosenthal and Brittany Ghiroli, that Jerry is very involved. The hiring of Pedro Grifol, the hiring of Pedro Grifol being an outside hire, and the fact that people wanted also a new GM to be an outside hire, people within the Sox organization. Here's this excerpt. Grifol was an outside hire who came from the Royals. People within the org advocated for Reinsdorf to go outside for his new GM as well. He ignored those appeals and instead promoted Chris Getz, former White Sox player, just 9 days after Rick Hahn and Kenny Williams were dismissed without interviewing a single external candidate. And Big Dave, I'm curious to get your take on this as far as Jerry's hiring process, because this to me, I did not know this detail. It's probably already been reported, but it was news to me. The decision required the Sox to work with Major League Baseball on a backfill plan to satisfy the ceiling rule, which is aimed at diversifying front office candidates. Reinsdorf said at the time he selected Getz because he knew the Sox organization intimately and, quote, "we want to get better as fast as we possibly can," end quote. I remember that quote about getting better as fast as we can. I had not known until reading this column yesterday about what. So how do you back end fulfill this league rule about interviewing the sufficient number of candidates before hiring someone? Because that does not reflect well on you and your hiring process.
I mean, I guess you just got to be the man, I guess, and be able to go back and around those kind of things and get those kind of things that happen to you. Jerry is definitely like I said, for me, it just strictly plays back to the loyalty. Because I don't even think he was looking at it from oh man, I need to look at and bring in some guys, and deal with this diversity and, give guys this kind of opportunity and look at them like that. I don't even think that crossed his mind. I think he just was like, I want him and that's it. And I don't want anything else. And this will be the guy and that will be my guy. Okay, we're good, right? Wait, what? What's this rule you're talking about? I don't know what you want right now. What do you mean? I just want my guy. Give me my guy. So I think that's what he was on, he just wanted who he wanted, and he knew who he wanted and didn't want to waste time getting started. As he said, wanted to get back to winning and doing those things. And ironically, with White Sox about to be the worst team ever in Major League Baseball history after coming off another 100th season last year. So the winning, yeah, that's way down the line. But he wanted who he wanted. I can't say I don't have an issue with that. I like people who understood who they wanted and didn't want to waste time getting anything like that. But I could see how that would look like, yo, man, you know what I mean? Like, give somebody an opportunity to interview or something like that and bring them in to talk to them and give them that kind of a chance. He might be looking at it like, dude, I just had Kenny Williams here for like 40 years. Like, what do you want me to do here? So he could be looking at it from a bunch of different kind of ways. But I truly think that he was like, this is my guy. I'm not going to waste any time on it. This is who I want, and that's who I'm going to hire. Do I agree with the hire? Hell no. No, I absolutely didn't agree with it when it happened. I thought it was a terrible decision because that's just not the thing to do, is to not go through an actual process, especially when you're coming off a 100-win-loss season, especially after the disaster of bringing in Tony La Russa like you did, especially after losing basically all of your guys, you know what I mean, that were on your team that season. I'm talking about Tony. I'm talking about Jose Abreu when I say those things like that. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I would want to bring in some people to be like, okay, how can we change this? How can we fix this? So there's one thing to be said about, knowing what you want and knowing, what I'm saying, that this is the person you want. But that's just not how I'm going to do it, especially coming off of a season like that and just how everything looked in that season. And I want to go into the new one as best as possible. And hiring Getz and hiring Gaffol was not the right decisions, in my opinion. And
like, I do want to say that, like, this is a business of relationships. I do think that there is a fundamental truth in that, like, and not to say that those things always make it work, because that's obviously not the case, but like, this is not the only time in sports when somebody has like worked with their guy. I mean, Eric Gordon, it just went back to the 76ers to go play with Daryl Morey again. James Harden followed him around for years and years. Like Gar Forman's guy was Fred Hoiberg, and that's why they hired him. I mean, this kind of thing, again, not saying these are great examples, but it's not out of line with how these organizations operate. So I do think that there's an element to that. And that's why you see like a whole coaching staff going, and like Mo Cheeks came over to work with Billy Donovan again. That was one of his guys that he worked with the Thunder. I mean, there's just a million examples of this kind of thing happening all over the league. Now, should you also do your due diligence and, try to interview the best candidates available? understand what people's shortcomings are and try to complement them if you are going to, stick with one of your guys, and put together a front office or a coaching staff that, takes things holistically and doesn't just kind of go with the same old approach. So there's definitely a line to be had there. And when it comes to the Bulls, again, I think the Bulls did the right thing in 2020 or whenever it was, when they moved on from Gar and Pax and they brought in new people. They brought in AK, they brought in Eversley, and then they allowed those guys to make their coaching hire. So I think that is something that the Bulls have done in the past. Now, to answer your earlier question, Matt, and I don't know the answer to this. Does this mean that now this loyalty factor won't apply to AK and Eversley because they weren't around during the glory days, because they haven't been by Jerry's side for years and years and years? I don't know. That's possible. I have no idea. But what I do know is that they got extensions 1 year after making the playoffs one time. So there's clearly this element of, if you succeed in the eyes of ownership, you'll be rewarded. They will be loyal to you for that. Now, the past 2 or 3 years has not been the case, and we'll see how that goes. And, if there is an element of okay, we understand this is not working, maybe let's go a different direction. Maybe we'll not renew these guys' contracts. I do think, and the way we've talked about it with Patrick, this is kind of a prove it situation for the front office here, where they just had 2 years which did not work. Everybody knew that was the direction it was going, warned them about it. They still went that way, and it didn't work. And now, maybe through their own decision, maybe through the fact that they couldn't get off Zach, they have to pivot now. They had to lose out on DeRozan. They weren't able to bring him back because of this contract that they gave Zach LaVine. So now they're in a situation where they have to make a pivot. I'm not sure exactly how many years left they have in their contract. I believe it's 2. This would be year 4 of the original. And then my understanding is that they each got 2-year extensions. So who knows? But I do think that this is a big year for AK and Eversley in terms of laying the groundwork for a team that they can show ownership is on the right path. And so I think that's part of the reason why you're not going into a full-on teardown where, in 1 year's time, if you have nothing to show for that, that's a hard sell to ownership to be able to keep your job longer term. So I think that's, that is what it is. That could be considered a bad thing from ownership's perspective in terms of, maybe it's better to just start fresh if you know that this front office group is going to start to kind of make moves to try to protect their future. Or is it the loyalty factor of you believe and trust in these guys and what they've been able to do, and you feel like they're going to set them on a better path here moving forward? So I don't know the answer to that. It's kind of just rumor and talking fodder, but I do think that this is a big year for the Bulls, not just obviously from in the perspective of the fact that they have to redefine the direction of their future, but also for the front office group to reestablish themselves as the right guys for this job.
Hey, Matt, real quick. When just to that point of looking at other candidates for your position, Ozzie Guillen was not the guy they were looking at to hire. He had to keep calling and getting on their nerves. You know what I'm saying? Getting on Kenny Williams' nerves, and just kept telling him, give me a shot, give me an interview. And Kenny didn't want to do it. Then he finally gave him an interview, and then he walked out with the job. You know what I'm saying? So just those kind of things and those kind of opportunities kind of lends itself to why you kind of go through a process of seeing who's the best guy for the position,
And to that end, I think that is one of the distinctions here when you're talking White Sox versus Bulls and Jerry owning both. And it might even be a sort of silver lining. I mean, it's not a great silver lining, but it might be one. Talking about that Gets hiring process, in the column, they write, why not at least interview people from other organizations, even just to learn how other teams operate? Quote, Jerry just thinks he has the answers, end quote, said a former staffer. And that, I think, is the good news for Bulls fans, because when it comes to the Bulls, Jerry doesn't think he has all the answers. Jerry handed the team off to his son, Michael, and said, here, you run this team. My main passion is the White Sox. I'm going to keep focusing and working on the White Sox. So Jerry doesn't ever, I don't think he had all the right answers as far as who he should hire and who he should employ and who the team's roster should be when it came to running the Bulls day-to-day, season to season. I will say on top of that, maybe Michael Reinsdorf also doesn't have all the answers, but hopefully he doesn't think he has all the answers the way his father does with the White Sox. Then the problem becomes, how do you know how to bring in, speaking of the hiring process, when you're an owner of a sports team, the best candidates who do have the answers to start building a winning culture with your ball club, whether it be baseball or basketball? Because, look, I think most Bulls fans, if you asked them in February of 2022, when the Bulls came into the All-Star break tied for first in the East, would say to you, wow, this AK and Eversley do a pretty nice job. You know, we're in first place. Flip the whole roster. Like, yeah, we paid a lot for the Vooch trade, but like, we're in first place. And clearly in pro sports, things can change quickly, or things can change slowly and drawn out of, continuity 3.0. But it also makes me think about the Ted Phillips factor with the McCaskey family and the Chicago Bears. How do you, as an ownership group who don't really know a lot about the sports and the people who have the best brains to run the sports and build your team and build your system, how do you know how to find and hire the right people? And that was always a big gripe I had with Ted Phillips, because the McCaskies were like, Ted Phillips is our guy. And I was like, Ted Phillips keeps hiring the wrong people. So Jerry might not be, master of puppeting his way in the Bulls system the way he still is with the White Sox. But if it's Michael doing it and Michael running it, how do we make sure that he is the one bringing in the right hires? Because, again, 2 years ago and change, people probably, for the most of Bulls Nation, thought that AK and Eversley were the right hires and they were doing a good job. I think that tone has shifted now from a significant portion of the fan base. If it is, in fact, as Will was discussing earlier, yeah, they have extensions. We don't know maybe how long they are. Maybe they do not have the same loyalty badge on them that John and Gar did for so many years. If they do make another change in the front office chairs, how does Michael Reinsdorf bring in the right people to interview and then ultimately hire? That's my concern attached to the silver lining.
Yeah, I mean, that's going to be like a great test to kind of get a sense of temperature check of where this team is headed long term. Again, I'm not saying like they need to be firing the front office and finding new people, but if that is the direction that they take in the coming years, are they going to go back to the John Paxson well, or are they going to try to find someone new and take seriously a bunch of new hires and outside people? Again, I'm not saying that's going to happen. I'm not saying anything, but just if that does happen, that will be an interesting test case for how similar or different is this Bulls situation from the White Sox. Are they going to kind of go back to the same playbook, or are they going to try to figure out a new pathway? Or are AK and Eversley going to be able to figure out that new pathway and maybe stay pat there? So again, I think this year is going to tell us a lot about the future of this team, both from what's on the court and the players on the current roster, but also in terms of decision-making and coaching. Like, it's rare that these people have jobs forever. Gar and Pax had their jobs longer than most. And, it's already been 4 years. And obviously there's been a brief period of good. And more often than not, things have not gone well for this team. So we'll just kind of have to see how that transpires. But I do think that in terms of the White Sox, it's clearly a different direction because they already made the big change. And so to me, it's not as much like, are they too loyal to a fault or whatever? It's more just like, okay, well, what does this mean for the future? Because it worked or didn't, like, how does that inform your next decision?
I think that's a good question, but I do think loyalty is in it. I don't think Leopard changes his spots. Like, he is who he is. Like, he's been this way from the beginning, and he's going to be loyal to who he's going to be loyal to. And look, none of this is a problem as long as it ends in winning. And I think that's the bottom line of all of this. None of this is an issue if it ends in multiple playoff appearances, if it ends in championships, if it ends in championship appearances. Then none of this is an issue. Nobody cares how the sausage is made. Everybody just wants to eat. So as long as people can eat, it's fine. It's when, that is not the case, where you get stuff like this and you get these kind of people whispering and you get national media looking at you and saying, talking down and, those kind of things. And, it's like a dam, that's leaking, like, how many fingers you got to plug it, bro? You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. How many fingers you got to plug that down? So go ahead, bro.
I think that actually could be considered a problem, because if you look back at the quote, like, this is somebody who maybe knew what they were doing in 1992, but 30 years have gone by and a lot has changed since then. Like, if you do just look at it as okay, we're winning, so everything must be going fine, that could be masking some of the underlying structural problems that go into the process of how things work. And I think, to me, that actually is a huge problem with what has happened with the Bulls over the last 25 years. They had a ton of success. Everybody was winning. Everything was great. But it masked a lot of the
there was a ton of
everything that we
dysfunction
learned
going
from,
on while they were winning.
everything that we learned from The Last Dance.
Yeah.
And I think that also sets you up to continue to do things the way that you're doing them, because look, it won us 6 championships in 8 years. But in reality, there was a lot of luck associated with that, right? It was drafting Michael Jordan 3rd overall. It was, making the trade for Scottie Pippen, bringing in the right guys, and everything kind of coming together in a perfect storm that leads you to, again, having the most success that an organization could possibly have. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to work that way in the future. And so, to me, when I look at this, it's more about, how do you put together the right process where even if you don't have the winning in 1 year, you're still on the right path forward. And that's, to me, something that I have not seen from this team over the last several years, and something that I've, in various different ways, maybe in some more fairly than others, tried to advocate over the last couple of years, because that's what I think needs to happen in order to really get this thing going on the right track. And again, I'm looking at it from the perspective of an exercise, an intellectual and thought exercise of how do you put together a winning team. So that's just the way that I look at it. So again, that's not necessarily how the team would or anything like that, but just from my perspective, that's kind of how I see it.
Yeah, I get that, Will, and I don't think you're wrong, but I think in Chicago, we associate that dysfunction with winning. Like, I can sit and point to every single franchise and point to this dysfunction on those teams, but then point to the titles as well. I mean, the Bears, my God, 85? Are you kidding? Super dysfunctional. We just told tons of agitators, you know what I'm saying? And guys like that, Ozzie Guillen and AJ Brzezinski are agitators. Phil Jackson and Michael Jordan and Scotty, definitely, and Dennis Rodman, for God's sakes. Like, those are,
I mean, even the Cubs team that went to 3 straight NLCS and won the series in 16.
Oh, like, my God.
Some of the stories didn't come out until later, but oh my God, the dysfunction behind the scenes on that team.
Sure. And you're never gonna
even Golden State. Even Golden State Warriors is dysfunction. You know what I'm saying? Like, you're going to have those things. Like, but again, nobody says anything while it's winning going on. That's a very hard thing to predict and to say, okay, next year, how do we do this again? How do we win again for 5 years when how you did it is right in your face? And so you want to keep doing the same things. You want to change and flip some things for sure. You don't want to just stay the same, or you end up having this conversation we're having now about Jerry being the man in 92 and not the man in 2024 because he didn't switch up. Of course, that needs to occur and change, but when you saw yourself do it one way and it got done multiple ways, you kind of keep going back to the well, for better or for worse. You kind of keep going back to that well, seeing if you can get some more water from that. And sometimes you just end up getting blood from a stone, bro. And you just go ahead, you have to start over again. And then you bring in guys like Will to go Gottlieb to show people a new way.
And I think that is kind of my point. Like, even when you look at the Cubs in relation to some of these other teams, it's like they had the process. They did the process. If you think about like what Theo Epstein came in and did, it was the process. It was the Sam Hinkie 76ers process. It was a blow up for several years, accumulate draft picks, build a bunch of young prospects through, the draft and through your minor system. And then once those guys are ready, then you start to put the right pieces around them. And to me, like, that's how you build sustained success. And I'm sure there's more to it than that. But just being kind of like the outsider perspective of it, that's to me the formula. And it's not try to find lightning in a bottle 1 year because somebody else got hurt or whatever. I mean, that's a recipe for, putting together a good team once. And I think that's kind of how you end up in a situation where you're looking at yourself and saying, wow, well, we were great in 2005, but nothing has worked lately. So do we just keep on doing it that way, or do we try to find the next approach?
Yeah, I mean, I think we can put a pin in this conversation for now because we are out of time. And shout out to everybody who was hanging out in the comments and offering your 2 cents. I know we didn't really get to a lot of comments in this conversation today. I kind of, at least personally, did that purposefully because I wanted this to be an intellectual conversation about this report about Jerry Reinsdorf, the owner of the White Sox and the Bulls, and not necessarily let emotion get the best of us in a conversation like this, because we did learn some new things in this report, and some of these things we were reminded of. And I feel like we needed to try to figure out what is White Sox, what is Bulls, what is overarching, and where do we go from here? And I am guilty, like 1A, to let myself become overcome with emotions when you have conversations like that about these teams that we love so much. So shout out to everybody in the comments. I'm sorry we didn't get to many of y'all, but we can continue this conversation whenever, because it'll always be around. So long as these people, are making the decisions to run the teams that we all love so much. Hope everybody had a great week. Enjoyed our week's worth of shows. Hit that like button on your way out if you haven't done it yet and you were watching on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe to our CHGO Sports YouTube channel. Make sure you grab yourself a ticket to come hang out with our CHGO Bears crew and your fellow diehard Bears fans. Joe's on Weed is the place to be this Sunday for Bears and Colts. And we will be... Quick. Yeah, you got something, Dave?
Quick, Matt. I just found out that I'm hosting that. So y'all come through, hang out, enjoy that.
Of course you are. Well, yeah, just like you found out earlier that day that you were going to be the MC for our CHGO Bears draft party earlier this year.
Yeah, literally walking out the office, I found this out. So yeah, that's how it went. So yeah, I will be hosting, man, and I'm excited to do it.
We keep Dave around for a variety of reasons, y'all. This is a man who wears many hats. Hope to see people there over at Joe's on Weed. Have a great start to your weekend. We will be back on Monday with a fresh slate of episodes for y'all. In the meantime, Will the Goat is at Will_Gottlieb. Big Dave is at Bow, BAWL Sports. Our pal producer on the controls behind the scenes is the one and only Young Spathis at Joey Spathis. I'm Bulls_Peck. We are CHGO_Bulls. Much love and appreciation, Bulls Nation. We'll talk to you next time. See you, Red. Be good.
We all silly.